LGBT representation in Western animation has been a hot issue for a decade now, ever since The Legend of Korra ended with a very hasty canonization of a pairing that had initially been born out of spite toward the love triangle in the first and second season. I mean, it even managed to eclipse the ever-popular Zutara because Korrasami's fandom weren't, abusive ghouls. When this happened, it was a big moment, a milestone for gay representation in a cartoon for children. Hypothetically for children. This blew open the door for other creators to start putting gay and trans characters in their shows. Gravity Falls got to have a pair of gay cops. Well, that's not... They got to have a similar moment in the finale, just like Korrasami. Steven Universe went even further and gave an entire series-long character arc for a character getting over the love of her life, and then later had several gay couples, some of whom even got to be on screen and have, speaking roles. Then, just a few years later, the She-Ra franchise was rebooted into She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which went even further and featured a series-long romantic arc between the two lead characters, who are adopted sisters, and one of them relentlessly stalks and abuses the other like Jason Dean on estrogen, but they kiss, and that was a milestone.
Come on, Adora. You can't let distractions keep you from transforming.
What's going on?
Ooh, are we messing with Adora? Petra, do you have to sit right there?
What? I'm not doing anything.
And then, in the year of our Lord 2022, Dana Terrace released The Owl House. The Owl House actually released in 2020, but the important part was in 2022, which featured not only a gay relationship that got to be a relationship before the finale, but also multiple trans characters who get to be fully fleshed out characters. And I'm not about to be sarcastic like with the others. The Owl House was great. Ending was kind of crap, but that's not relevant to this video. Finally, the work that had started in 2014 had reached its goal. Finally, we had gay rep in a children's cartoon that didn't have to compromise anything. Finally, Western animation could stand on top of the hill it had been struggling to climb for years and look back at the other hill that had already been climbed a decade prior. I'm not the first person to suggest that the discourse around LGBT representation in Western animation hasn't always been very productive. From putting creators on pedestals and treating them as infallible gods to hyper-focusing on one genre of animation, the push for better LGBT representation in animation hasn't been as extensive as it could be. These 5 series are often treated as the pioneers of gay rep in Western cartoons, the big boundary pushers who set the stage for everyone else. But all of them have some pretty egregious flaws that could cause some people to argue their importance, or others to discount them entirely. Plenty of shows during this era had come out with arguably better gay rep more quickly than these ones had. The Loud House, rather notably, had a multi-episode long arc involving Luna and her girlfriend Sam, even dropping the G word long before the Owl House did. The Casa Grandes also beat them to that punch as well. Kipo and the Age of Wonder Beasts opened its first season with a character talking very frankly about being gay, and Craig of the Creek has been doing casual gay rep almost non-stop since 2018. Craig of the Creek is actually made by all of Steven Universe's good writers who burned out and left. In discussions about LGBT rep, these shows are often discounted, if not ignored entirely, because all the attention and focus is on the big-scale adventure epics with plenty of action and huge worlds and high stakes. And so the others just don't count. They're something else, a lesser class of animation. This is pretty clear and obvious erasure, but the point I'm about to get at is that this erasure goes back even further, because it wasn't 2021 when a gay character finally got to say boyfriend or girlfriend, and it wasn't even 2017. It was 2004. So one of the most frustrating parts of discussing Western animation is that to most people, Western strictly means American. See, anime doesn't have this problem. We all know what that means, and nobody calls it Eastern animation. Some weeb probably is somewhere, but whatever. Anyway, like everything else related to the West, the US is centered as the single most important entity, and so when something is created or produced by other countries in the West, its importance is related back to America in some way. Case in point, Canada has had a healthy and thriving animation industry for years. Canadian programs were more likely to be seen in Canada over the US, owing to laws mandating that any network that does business in Canada has to in some way promote Canadian-made art. So shows from Disney, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon would have to share space with shows made by Canadian studios. Hence why most Canadians didn't really get the Disney Channel or Cartoon Network. Instead, we had Teletoon and YTV. Actually, here's a fun fact in that regard. In Canada, we have restrictions on how much advertising you can put in children's media. So cartoons imported from the US and Japan would have spaces in between them for ads that had to be filled with something. So YTV ran this in-between segment called The Zone, which had 2 hosts discussing the shows and then later on started developing their own stories.
We call this the couch zone, couch area, and are you comfortable? Would you like to do some interviews now that you're in the zone? Maybe with
Sure, but did you notice that it's ripped?
Well, yeah, I did that myself.
You know, I think you're delirious. Sure.
I'm not.
No, breathe.
Hey, watch the thumb.
I didn't touch your thumb.
You know what? I'm fine. The thumb will be fine. We'll be fine. Jenny, I think we should go to YTV right now. Professor...
I'm pretty sure I'm the only person alive who remembers the Zone or the Yokomites. Anyway, here in Canada, laws about what you could and couldn't put on TV were a little different. This, along with Canadians generally being more progressive on average than Americans, meant that gay characters made it to screen in Canada long before they did in the US. And 2 of my 3 examples are from Canadian shows that were promptly censored when they crossed over to the US. Braceface is a show about Sharon Spitz, a teenage girl who gets braces one day that turn out to be electromagnetically charged, as in they can intercept phone calls and use Sharon's mouth as a speaker, they can magnetically pull in metal objects, they can absorb electricity and redirect it somewhere else, and they can even just straight up summon lightning when Sharon's angry. No, this isn't a superhero show, it's just an intense inconvenience to Sharon at every hour of every day. It's like That's So Raven, but with significantly higher chances of property damage. A lot of shows were like that back then. These days there'd be an entire season-long arc to learning the ins and outs of Sharon's magnetic teeth, and then being a part of some conspiracy by a villain with mommy issues, but back then cartoons were doing weird shit like this all the time. The entire show is just about Sharon's personal life trying to navigate the social minefield of vicious sociopathic teenage girls in middle school. Or, for you young folk out there, your teachers posting TikToks talking shit about you. Anyway, in the second season, yes, this show was good enough to get 3 entire seasons, Sharon starts high school and every single 9th grader is given a mentor from the older grades. Canadian high schools don't actually have this, instead they have a school supply list that doesn't include mandatory Kevlar. Sharon ends up getting Dion, who, in her words...
Well, put it this way. Dion was the most unique person I'd ever met.
How unique is Dion? Well, just looking at him, you can already tell exactly where they're going with him. The best part is, he has a dead name.
My birth moniker's Mark Jones. I get bored just saying it. Dion's more moi, don't you think? An homage to Celine.
Dion is a part-time fashion designer who does all sorts of weird recycling bits, like trying to make a dress out of paper bags and succeeding to make a sequin dress out of soda can tabs. His first episode largely deals with him being branded as the freak at school and Sharon getting wrapped up in his reputation. As you can probably infer, Dion being a somewhat effeminate man who designs fashion out of soda cans doesn't win him a lot of friends. However, Dion lets it mostly roll off his back. You get the sense he's used to this kind of treatment from others, which is tragic, to the point that when Sharon gets skittish about being around him because of how it affects her ability to fit in, Dion cuts through her mealy-mouthed waffling because he's been through this before.
I understand. Completely.
It's just that...
You don't need to explain. I get the message loud and clear. Keep away from the freak. Everyone else's term. Not mine, by the way. You've picked up high school survival tactics pretty quickly. Good for you.
Sharon comes around eventually, and she and Dion are friends for the rest of the series, though Dion only appears in a few episodes and only 2 of them involve him playing a significant role in the story. The other one is Game, Setup, and Match, where Sharon decides apropos of nothing that Dion needs a boyfriend. No, literally.
He said he's looking for the one. But I think he's having a hard time finding someone. I think it would be so cute if he had a boyfriend.
Yeah, they just dropped that with no fanfare at all, like it's the most casual thing in the world. This was 2004, so she decides to set him up with a new character, Houston, who is introduced with a bag adorned with a rainbow flag with a pink triangle in the center, and even mentions having an ex-boyfriend.
I'm Sharon. I live here. And you're here because...
My ex-boyfriend's a patient of your mom's. She wants to redecorate her office, so he recommended me.
Yeah, the writers of Braceface weren't mincing words. I mean, they don't say gay, but they say basically everything else.
Anyway, the dating pool in Elkford's pretty small, and I'm already swimming in the shallow end.
The entire episode is Sharon making increasingly desperate attempts to set Houston and Dion up, falling into the usual girl with a gay friend trap of thinking her friend will rut himself onto the closest gay guy in the room. However, Dion isn't actually looking for anyone at the moment. He makes a remark about looking for the one eventually, but it's not his focus, and the whole experience ends up being awkward for both of them, which is why they end up getting back at her almost immediately afterward. The whole episode is a very cute parable about boundaries and not projecting your own single angst onto your friends, because that's what Sharon's doing. But I think what stands out about Dion as a character is how relaxed he is. You can easily see that he's that flamboyant kind of gay man, but he's not at the extreme caricature that Glee would hit 5 years later. He's just vibing and being himself. It's interesting how good Dion looks in hindsight, because I remember 15 years ago when a character like Dion would have been derided as a stereotype. A flamboyant fashion designer who sasses the popular girl wasn't exactly setting the world on fire, even if it was such a casual first for children's animation. And even today, there are some people who look at that kind of character and cringe. But time makes fools of us all, and if we can get article after article about what a milestone for gay representation it is that a show had a 5-season-long arc of someone being both abusive and possessive toward their older sister, then I think a guy sparkling a little bit can be officially declared an unproblematic fave. The environment around Dion is so casual, so you might be wondering how this happened in 2004 of all times. Well, in Canada, there was always a market for teenage animation. Nelvana, the production company behind Braceface, was producing a lot of animated shows aimed at teenagers about things teenagers cared about. This was a market that the United States just straight up doesn't have. Animation for teenagers was usually cut up to be made child-friendly or pushed into the adult animation ghetto. This has extended into the rest of the American animation industry and even to the audience, with shows made for teenagers in other regions often being filed under adult animation, giving some people the idea that there's no middle ground between a show for 5-year-olds and a show for adults, and giving some people a complex about what constitutes adult. So shows like Braceface didn't air in a state that wasn't butchered. Most of the subject matter, not just Dion, but a lot of other material in the series, didn't survive the trip over to the United States. The third season especially wasn't aired at all because it started tackling heavier subject matter. This contributes to why Dion isn't remembered. Sure, American animation fans were aware of Dion, and many were even fond of him, but since he didn't air in the US, there's a sense among Americans that he didn't count. This is a sentiment that only got worse as the years went on and Western animation started hyperinflating the importance of the adventure fantasy genre. So you also didn't count unless you were in a show that was already important. So even if he was available through the same mediums that saw subtitled 90s anime get into everyone's hands, Dion just wasn't remembered because he didn't fit into that very narrow mold.
Gotta make the good times last.
16 was an animated sitcom aimed at teenagers that aired from 2004 to 2010. Fuck, 6 years, really? Anyway, the premise was about 6 teens and the shit they get up to at the Galleria Mall after they all get part-time jobs. The series is actually a lot better than most people ever gave it credit for, and its staying power has only dwindled since the adventure fantasy scourge pushed every contemporary show into a ghetto. The episode we're talking about is a role reversal, specifically the B-plot where Nikki has a new co-worker at the khaki barn named Jean, who she hits it off with pretty quickly. Nikki's actually really glad to have a co-worker she doesn't want to strangle because her other co-workers are the other girls that she's totally not like. In keeping with the theme set by Braceface, everyone else clocks Jean as gay almost immediately.
Who's that, Nick?
That's Jean.
The new girl?
The one you like so much?
Yeah.
She's totally into you.
What?
It's kinda obvious.
I caught that.
Yep.
Oh, you're all wrong.
Once again, there's a casual air with which a gay character can just exist, and everyone treats it as so mundane that they're all giggling about Nikki's new girlfriend. Actually, that happens earlier in the episode as well.
If you want to get asked out, you have to start thinking like a girl. Because all the girls are out there thinking like guys, and guys don't ask out other guys.
Some guys ask out other...
Not the conversation we're having.
Oh, also, this is the episode where that Tumblr meme comes from.
So I'm just laying out a little sugar to catch my snake.
Flies. Sugar catches flies.
What catches snakes?
You gotta wear snake traps.
No, you need those metal sticks with the grabber at the end.
My grandmother uses those to get cereal down from her cupboard. Why are there snakes in your grandmother's cereal?
Anyway, now racked with insecurity, Nikki tries to subtly figure out if Jean is actually gay without actually saying it. You know, that old chestnut, something even Braceface didn't manage to get away from. However, Jean just cuts through all of that.
Nick, if you're trying to find out if I'm gay, it's okay to just ask.
It's not like I was...
Yes, I'm into girls, and I'm really flattered. But I already have a date for the dance tonight. Are we all right? Still friends?
Yeah. She's just too darn cool.
And that's it. Jean is seen with her girlfriend during the dance later, and that's actually the last we ever see of Jean. 16 dedicated a single subplot of a single episode to a character for whom being gay is such a straightforward part of themselves that it's talked about so casually. Sure, Jean is a one-off bit character, but at no point is she made to hide behind metaphors, at no point is she made the butt of the joke, and at no point are you expected to follow the showrunner's live streams in order to figure out if she's actually gay. This was 2010, 4 years before Korra and Asami held hands into the spirit portal. In fact, compared to Dion, who is a regular member of the cast and gets a few episodes dedicated specifically to him, this is actually a backslide. People may forget this, but the prevailing attitude about writing gay characters in 2010 was that you can't just say it outright. You gotta be subtle. This wasn't just homophobes saying this was actual gay people saying this as well, saying it was better to sneak under the radar, and 2 Nelvana series just straight up refused to do that to varying degrees of enthusiasm. Still, I like Jean. She might be in only one episode, but it's a good episode. 16 in general had better writing than most animated shows of its day, and it even had an episode about periods years before turning red, made it acceptable to talk about it on American TV. I'd say if you like delving into animation history, 16 should be on your radar.
Oops.
Lloyd in Space, yet another show that really couldn't possibly air today. It's another slice of life show, but the hook is that it takes place on a space station between a bunch of aliens. The titular Lloyd is your old-fashioned green alien with an antenna, and then you have a one-token human, a giant blob monster voiced by Patrick Starr, and a sentient brain. If the show aired today, there'd be a periphery of 20-somethings demanding to know the lore behind humans getting into space. Anyway, the episode in question is neither boy nor girl, an episode centered around a genderless alien named Zoit. As the boys start arguing with a group of girls about whose music is better, they decide to ask Zoit for their input, only for Zoit to...
I guess I'd have to say that Aurora's music is sparse, allowing the themes of suffering and depression to resonate in her lyrics, while total cosmic annihilation is pure power. Their music assaults your ears with the force of a solar windstorm. So there you go. Hope that helps.
Go full YouTuber on it. Well done, Zoit. Then, when one of the guys genders Zoit as male, it starts an argument over what gender Zoit is, leading to a string of attempts to discern Zoit's gender before they just up and ask them. And Zoit says...
Oh, that. I thought you knew. I'm neither.
Side note, anyone miss when commercial breaks were used to establish tension? Anyway, Zoid explains that their species doesn't have a gender until they hit puberty, and then choose what their gender is going to be, leading to an all-out battle of the sexes as the two groups of kids try to push Zoid in one direction over the other, with each of the guys all secretly getting into the feminine things they're watching Zoid do, so good job there. Zoid eventually finds out they're being used and is rightfully upset about it, then the groups feel bad about it and flip and give Zoid birthday gifts for the opposite gender as an apology. They're trying. They're not very bright, but they're trying. Unfortunately, they start arguing again, but this time Zoid cuts them off and really cuts to the heart of the issue of cisnormativity.
There you go again, pushing me and pulling me, back and forth. Be a boy, be a girl. Well, I've had it.
Kai, we were only trying to help you make the right decision.
The right decision for you, maybe, but what about me?
Oh, yeah. You.
Fuck it, this was 2002, and that's better material for a little baby trans still in their eggs than anything that airs today. It's not just aimed at them, it's aimed squarely at their cis-normative parents sitting in the living room with them. The next day, Zoe comes back into school looking no different and actually refuses to tell any of them what they picked, and...
I've decided I'm not telling.
What? But why not?
Because it's none of your business.
So we'll never find out if you're a boy or a girl?
Oh, you'll find out someday. When I get a crush on one of you.
Yeah, this is the part that tends to stick in people's craw, to the point that they ignore Zoid's speech earlier in the episode. It's weirdly heteronormative for an episode about how gender essentialism is stifling, and ignores the reality that gender identity and orientation are not mutually exclusive. However, it's not nearly as bad as 5 seasons of abusive codependent catgirl incest, so like, perspective. For 2002, a show for children taking a moment to stop and say, hey, all this gender essentialism isn't just bad for me, it's bad for all of you as well, is actually rather novel and touches on something we sometimes talk about, but not enough. Cisnormativity isn't just bad for trans people, it's bad for everyone. It harms everyone, puts pressure on everyone, and is used as a cudgel against people cis and trans alike. Zoit sort of gestures to the root of the issue in that all of them are implying men and women can't actually be friends or like the same things. Their perception of what it means to be a boy or a girl is centered on the stuff, consumption, hobbies, things that aren't explicitly gendered, something that Zoit themselves demonstrates earlier in the episode. It's similar to Princess Night in that it's ostensibly about sexism, but becomes an interesting look at gender identity because cisnormativity and sexism go hand in hand. These aren't issues that are separate from each other, especially as the modern day trans panic continues to fester and rot. A lot of people analyzing this episode tend to mark it down for the last second heteronormativity toward the end, but I think that's small potatoes compared to the surprisingly profound deconstruction of cisnormativity and the way in which the episode sticks to its guns by not revealing Zoid's gender at the end. And to that end, how do we know Zoid's not messing with them? I mean, their crush could be on anyone, not necessarily them, especially since Zoit never appears after this and thus was never part of the group. So yeah, I'm gonna say Zoit is good. No caveats, no asterisks, no nothing. Zoit's just damn good. This is a video of 2 goals. The first is to bring attention to moments in animation that are sadly forgotten. Characters who are uniquely forward-thinking for their time and who were genuinely well-written and earnest decades before the Owl House was even a glint in Dana Terrace's eye. A time when creators didn't have to compromise their entire creative vision in some weird Pavlovian mind game with the studio. They could just say shit. I used to have a bare minimum standards for LGBT rep in animation, and those standards were main characters in a healthy relationship before the finale. And it wasn't because I secretly hated other LGBT creators and wanted to put them under a microscope, despite what some morons would say. It's because I'd already grown up with good, and the next step was better. I used to watch Braceface as a kid, and Dion was the first time I'd seen a gay character being so casually in the cast. An accepted member of the group without any caveats or conditions. Yeah, he was Sharon's gay friend, but he was never just Sharon's gay friend. He didn't appear in a lot of episodes, but whenever he did, he was always just good. His self-respect, how he doesn't take garbage from people lying down, and how the story doesn't just humiliate him without acknowledging it as a problem, were all things I needed to see. Dion was a character who wouldn't accept anything less than what he deserved. This was in 2004, where even in Canadian schools it wasn't uncommon to see gay or faggot being thrown around as casual insults. Children were very casually homophobic without thinking about it, so being presented with a world where that just didn't happen was important. You know, as a young closeted bisexual going through some pretty horrific shit at the time, a character like Dion struck a chord with me that I never knew existed, and I'm sad to say that even I forgot about him. I've long cited 16 as the first example of gay rep in animation. In fact, I did it just last video, because after a certain point, watching a show like Braceface wasn't cool, and so I let it vanish into the memory hole. Rewatching it for this video, I'd expected to have to put asterisks all over it saying, well, it was 2004, but I was surprised at how well it held up. How well all of them held up, really. They were small, but they've aged extremely well in a time where not only is older gay rep aging poorly, but even the newer stuff is coming out with some moldy spots on it right out of the box. Which brings me to the second goal, and that is to express a long-standing frustration with how LGBT rep in animation is often discussed and often presented. Because Dion, Jean, and Zoit are characters who are presented with respect and dignity, who get to just exist. And whenever I bring them up, I'm always told how they don't count. The narrative of Korra to Steven to She-Ra to Owl House is so important for some people to maintain, that this prestige genre of adventure animation has to have a uniquely different position above everything else. It's so weirdly arrogant for a subgenre that couldn't get its shit together for over a decade. Legend of Korra was subjected to all kinds of myth-making about how Breik were setting up Korrasami from season 3, and how they were taken off the air because of gay subtext, and they fought tooth and nail for it, and none of that was true. It was a popular ship thrown in for the last few episodes, and it was in fact so ambiguous that the creators had to confirm it on Twitter after the fact. Steven Universe is often hailed as the messiah of gay animation, and yet when you actually watch it, you're treated to maybe a few scenes of Ruby and Sapphire, where their entire personality is each other, and the majority of the real estate is taken up by a slave being hopelessly and destructively in love with her master. And this is presented as some kind of tragic love story. It wouldn't be until the sequel series and several years of the creator being bludgeoned over the head by Twitter that this would actually be unpacked to any significant degree. She-Ra spent 5 seasons on increasingly elaborate displays of Catra brutalizing the object of her affections, with both the situation they were in and production materials making it clear that the two of them were adoptive siblings. And this was given a media parade for years. Even creators who have their heads on straight were lavishing it in tongue baths, and Catrador didn't have the plausible deniability that Rose and Pearl could have. At least they were able to say at the end, yeah, that was unhealthy and I was definitely not dragging that out for 3 seasons longer than necessary. No, they just have Adora hook up with her murderous, possessive sister. It wouldn't have been until the Owl House that we actually had gay characters that were healthy, not evil, equals, not hidden from the audience, and not legally related. Ironically, coming from the studio that was the most skittish about the gays. So it took the wannabe crowd until 2022 to reach the point that Braceface was at in 2004. With the knowledge of recent history, this is looking less and less like an increasing set of milestones and more like a course correction back to the point we were at. All the while, contemporary shows were sailing along as they always had, doing just fine in terms of LGBT rep. We could have been much further ahead by now, but because the actual trendsetters don't look a certain way or fit a certain aesthetic, they just don't count. Sure, they might not have aired in the US, but even when Americans are informed that other countries do in fact exist, excuses are still made to keep this mythology going. And this kind of revisionism is cyclical. I used to hear it a lot in 2016. Korra walked so Steven Universe could run. You know what I heard in 2019? Steven Universe walked so She-Ra could run. You know what I heard in 2021? She-Ra walked so the Owl House could run. We keep moving the goalpost to prop up the new shiny because we have memories of goldfish. If we didn't keep moving the goalpost, we'd start noticing how little we were actually moving. And it's not like it's a problem to not push the envelope. None of these shows are problems in of themselves. I mean, if you want to make a show about a trauma-bonded former slave or weird codependent catgirl incest, then the only one who can stop you is the studio letting you use its resources. The problem is in this mythology where we have to keep acting like our newest obsession is more revolutionary than it actually is. And there's no real secret as to why things got this way. Not only are American studios more skittish about gay rep than they were 20 years ago as a result of Republicans going on their delusional wokeness crusade, but the shift of fandom from fan forums completely isolated from the creators to Twitter, where every creator has an easily reachable account you can @ for some reason, has caused parasocial relationships to get even worse. Some creators have been put on extremely high pedestals, given reputations far beyond that of what they've actually done, and fans aggressively defend that reputation like it was their own child. One of these shows has problems in severe excess compared to the others. I won't say who. To a lot of their fans, the idea that a show about a 14-year-old girl with slapstick braces was even worth remembering at all was laughable. Not compared to Blorbo. Certainly not compared to such a grand operatic masterpiece. And certainly not if it risked tarnishing the trophy they'd spent half a decade molding in the first place. This is just different, darling. a better class of art. And I'd probably be less bothered by this if they ever put their money where their mouth was. The fact that anyone ever looked at this shit and thought to praise it as a good thing should be an embarrassment for everyone. It's not just that we deserve better, we had better. We've always had better. We've always been able to have better and demand better. I'd actually like a story that took something like what happens in She-Ra seriously, seeing someone fleeing across enemy lines to get away from their psychotically possessive sibling until they're collapsing in front of their new friends, trembling and begging for help. But watching one of the supposed landmark LGBT cartoons end with all that abuse and trauma bonding and unhealthy quasi-incestuous attachment being validated in the end was one of the most profoundly nauseating things I've ever seen put to screen. So I think you can appreciate where I'm coming from being told that this was where representation needed to be and everything that had ever surpassed it just doesn't count. Even if you like this, you understand why this can be frustrating, right? Especially as more and more people are genuinely saying shit like, we have too much good gay rep and we need more Rocky Horror.
Of course.
It's not like the rest of the 2010s got away from this either. Shows like The Loud House, The Casa Grandes, and Craig of the Creek didn't get anything close to the fanfare and media parades that these action-adventure shows did for seemingly no reason. And even other adventure shows couldn't get away from this. Kipo wasn't talked about anywhere near as much as the others, and that is an adventure fantasy series, and that's because the gay character is black and fandom is notoriously racist. This environment where only a few shows get to count can't help but feel suffocating. It can get infuriating to try and show people that, no, we've always been doing well, only to be dismissed because it's more important to prop certain creators up on a pedestal who thought Sailor Moon was the beginning and end of the gays' place in cartoons. I can't see the way discourse around LGBT rep and animation goes and not see this kind of classism, I guess, where shows are discarded because they don't closely remind the viewer of Sailor Moon or Utena, yes, I'm gonna keep calling it that, or Dragon Ball, where we keep pretending that our actual milestones don't exist because it's more important to maintain this fictitious view of a few creators as gods among NBs. It's not that I don't appreciate the attempt to tell more involved stories. For all of its virtues, Braceface does ultimately just have 2 episodes where a queen talks about fashion design, but the way in which animation fandom continues to throw intense amount of derision on anything that isn't trying to be shonen always bothered me, and it will continue to bother me. I don't live in the reality where only peak TV matters, and I'll never live in that reality, and my media analysis will never accept that reality. I know I'm pushing back against a tidal wave. I know that a lot of people will shout this down, but if even one person accepts just how good Dion is, then I'll consider this video to have been worth it. There's more examples of LGBT rep in animation going back as far as the 1950s, and it deserves to be examined and appreciated, so maybe I should pencil another one of these videos in. But for now, I'm Lily, and thanks for watching.
So